Chapter 38. Therefore, this battle of the world will only be between Tai Bu Tian and Diwu Qingru. And Diwu Qingru is most worried about Tai Bu Tian. Therefore, no matter what, he would rather take a roundabout route and kill Tai Bu Tian first. Therefore, our mission is to protect Tai Bu Tian's life. After all, we came from Great Zhao. If Tai Bu Tian dies, we will be the biggest suspects. We will be the first to be killed by Ironcloud Nation. And Great Zhao will not let traitors like us live. Chu Yang finished his analysis in one breath. Then he realized that all the focus was on one person, Tai Bu Tian. A 17 or 18-year-old boy was a thorn in the eyes of a matchless hero like Diwu Qingru. A thorn in his flesh. Then, how monstrous was this boy? In his previous life, Chu Yang only knew that Tai Bu Tian was assassinated at Kai Tian Gorge. He also knew that this person had great prestige. But he never cared about these things. Thinking about it now, he could not help but feel a chill down his spine. A 17 or 18-year-old boy who could rival Diwu Qingru. He was definitely not easy to deal with. This reminded Chu Yang of the legend of the upper three heavens, limitless invincible saber, Liu Yongxiong. This peerless legend had already become a legendary martial saint. Wouldn't he be as amazing as Diwu Qingru? There was also the all-powerful Duke Xie of upper three heavens, Ao Xie Yun. At such a young age, he was already evil. There was also the mysterious woman who controlled the dark side of upper three heavens, Jun Shizhu. These people, along with Tai Bu Tian and Diwu Qingru, were all rare geniuses. Fortunately, they were scattered in 3 different places. Otherwise, who knows what would happen to this world? There is one more thing you neglected. Wu Yunliang looked at him with admiration. We only need to help Tai Bu Tian defeat Diwu Qingru. Then we will have made a great contribution. Our Beyond the Heavens sect will rise. Plus, as long as we do it properly, we can eliminate all the hidden dangers of Beyond the Heavens sect. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Defeat Diwu Qingru? Easier said than done. Diwu Qingru has never been defeated in politics or war. Wanting to defeat him is difficult. Chu Yang thought this and immediately became alert. Wu Yunliang is right. Now that I've decided to go against my destiny, I must face Diwu Qingru. If I continue to maintain this belief that Diwu Qingru is invincible, then I will definitely lose. He had to win. At the very least, he had to keep Tai Bu Tian alive so that she could destroy Diwu Qingru's plan. Take control of the entire change of fate in your own hand. Whether it was Beyond the Heavens sect, Tan Tan, or Master. And Qing Wu. While he was thinking, he heard Wu Yunliang sigh and say, speaking of this matter, Chu Yang, you made a big mistake in this matter. The mistake you made has completely ruined my original plan. In fact, we can't even proceed. Chu Yang was taken aback and said, what? Did I make a mistake? He thought, I didn't do anything. How did he suddenly become so heinous? You killed Shi Qian Shan. You killed him too early. Wu Yunliang let out a long sigh. Shi Qian Shan was an indispensable part of my plan. Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. Shi Qian Shan? Correct. Although Shi Qian Shan is sinister and cunning, on the surface, he is mature and wise. Moreover, he is good at observing people and flattering people. Even though I despise this little brother of mine, he is a very good candidate for the government. Wu Yunliang sighed. Officialdom? Chu Yang was startled. What does this have to do with officialdom? My original plan was to have one person leave Beyond the Heavens sect and enter Ironcloud Nation with a secret identity. It would be best if he could become a trusted aide. First, he could ensure Ironcloud Nation's safety. Second, he could become someone who could speak for Beyond the Heavens sect in the event of success. Wu Yunliang said seriously, we have to rise, but we also have to bear such a great risk. What we need is not as simple as a Jianghu sect. But at that time, we will have no one in the court. Even if we have a great achievement, it will be useless if no one mentions it. At a critical moment, we must have someone like that. Using money to bribe officials is possible, but that kind of person is not reliable. Chu Yang nodded in agreement. If he can be bribed by you, then he can be bribed by others. He could even be bribed by Diwu Qingru. That would be the end of the line. Sending his own people in was the most reassuring thing. I originally wanted to send Shi Qianshan to Iron Cloud. But he was killed by you. Wu Yunliang snorted. Shi Qianshan even poisoned his master. Then, at a critical moment, betraying the sect is not a big deal. I actually think that by killing him, I have removed a hidden danger. Chu Yang opposed with equal harshness. This was the time to discuss conditions. When Chu Yang heard this, he knew what Wu Yunliang wanted him to do. Naturally, he would not give in so easily. Although this goal was exactly the same as his own, his heart was already very willing. But how could he let go of this opportunity to extort? My original plan was to send 2 elites, one to Great Zhao and the other to Iron Cloud. The one to Great Zhao would be in charge of gathering information. He would also be in charge of saving a few lives when the sect is in danger, thus continuing the sect's legacy. But after thinking about it, I gave up. No matter how beneficial it is always a way out. If there is a way out, there is no need to go all out. Shi Qianshan, you killed him too early. Wu Yunliang sighed and repeated this sentence. Yes, it was too early. Chu Yang also felt this way. These past few days, I have been observing you. Wu Yunliang said deeply, you, Chu Yang, are scheming and farsighted. You are vicious and merciless. Your skin is also thick enough. You are decisive and not sloppy. With your personality, you are a person who can achieve great things. In any aspect, you are 100 times better than Shi Qianshan. But only Shi Qianshan has 3 good qualities that you do not have. 3 good qualities? Chu Yang nodded and said, the first is being despicable. The second is being flexible and flattering. Seeing people speak human words, seeing ghosts speak ghost words. The third is being unscrupulous in order to achieve your goals. Very good. Wu Yunliang clapped his hands and said, do you think this makes you a bad person? These 3 good qualities can't even be called good qualities. Shouldn't it be eggs instead? No. I don't think so. Chu Yang said seriously, even though I will not do this, I have my own way of doing things. That's right. If these 3 things were placed on a person, then that person would be like a pile of dog shit. However, being involved in politics and being a part of the government is a must. Wu Yunliang sneered. Ever since the fight between you and Chu Ping, I have been coming to see you every 2 or 3 days. You have done very well. You have also realized your own shortcomings. Many times, you have been paying attention to Shi Qianshan. From him, you have been finding ways to make up for your own shortcomings. I am very pleased. Wu Yunliang sighed and said, unfortunately, Shi Qianshan's heart was too evil. In the end, he buried himself. But you have killed him too early. If you had let Shi Qianshan continue to beg for mercy, he would have wept bitterly and found all kinds of excuses to beg for mercy. In the end, even though you would have killed him, your heart would have felt that this person's reasons were not without reason. This is a very important lesson, but you have already killed him, so you have missed this lesson. Wu Yunliang said, there will always be adversity in life. Fighting alone in the whirlpool of politics, and with the identity of a spy, you will always face the threat of death. Begging for mercy at this critical moment is sometimes the greatest wisdom. Only by keeping your life can you do other things. Chu Yang was silent for a while. Then he quietly asked, Martial Uncle Sect Master, what you said, can you do it yourself? Even if you can, would you be willing to do it? Wu Yunliang was stunned. Chapter 39. After a long time, Wu Yunliang smiled bitterly and said, I can't do it. He sighed. Yes, if I can't do it, how can I ask someone else to do it? Wu Yunliang was silent for a while and said, but you killed Shi Qianshan, so this person will be replaced by you. You, go and complete this mission. Or rather, you, go and fight for your future. Also, help beyond the heavens sect. Chu Yang was silent. To complete this mission was to say goodbye to his previous life. Plus, he would have to face the most terrifying person in the world, Diwu Qingru. But this seemed to be a predestined enemy. If he wanted to change his fate and save Mo Qingwu, he must defeat Diwu Qingru. Reverse fate. With Chu Yang's current status, it was easier said than done to defeat a matchless hero like Diwu Qingru in all aspects. Chu Yang originally thought that since he was reborn, he would at least have some understanding of his previous life's matters. From there, he would be able to avoid calamity with ease. But at this moment, after this incident, he knew that his life had once again entered the boundless unknown. Whether it was danger or opportunity, it was 1,000 times more than his previous life. With one person's power, he could change the entire world. Death and life, ambush from all sides. Going against fate, going against the heavens, going against history, going against the heavenly Tao. But Chu Yang could not shrink back. For Qing Wu, for his master, for himself, for the sake of refusing to accept this fate arranged by the heavens, he must reverse it. I will go. Chu Yang was silent. His eyebrows slowly raised. These two words seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 catties. Wu Yunliang's heart relaxed, but he heard Chu Yang continue, "But I have a condition." "What condition?" "Speak. As long as the sect can do it, even if you want this old man's life, I will give it to you." Wu Yunliang relaxed. "I want to enter Seven Shades congregation ground." Chu Yang raised his head, his eyes flashing. "I don't want to compete with the younger brother. I also don't need the position and glory of being the younger brother of the sect master, but I need to increase my strength. If you agree, I will go." "No problem. Tomorrow I will let you in." Wu Yunliang paced 2 steps. His eyes flashed with determination. He immediately made a decision. Chu Yang's heart was excited. "Calamity Sword. You are about to come into my hands." The Calamity Sword was the key to reversing fate. It was also Chu Yang's biggest trump card. Absolute power. Once you accept this mission, I will erase all traces of you from Beyond the Heavens sect. From now on, you are no longer a disciple of Beyond the Heavens sect. This mission is extremely difficult and requires you to work hard on your own. What I can give you is 300,000 taels of silver and a good sword. As for what you need for cultivation, I will personally bring it to you in secret every time." Wu Yunliang let out a long sigh and said seriously, "Our opponent is Diwu Qingru. We cannot be careless. As long as Iron Cloud is not destroyed, Beyond the Heavens sect will rise. As for you, Chu Yang, even if you become the Prime Minister of Iron Cloud, it is your own fortune and your own future. Naturally, if you choose to return at that time, I'll welcome you with open arms. As for the sect tournament, it's just a means to attract the attention of the outside world. It's just a small game. It doesn't matter to you now. I only hope that no matter what, you will never forget what I have entrusted you today." Chu Yang nodded solemnly. "Right now, Chen is in Iron Cloud Citadel. Your martial uncles, Shui Yi, and Mu Shong do not know you. I will tell Chen what to do." "No, I will do it myself." Chu Yang refused. "What a joke. If I want to change my identity, then no one can know. It would be best if I change my identity and face so that even Wu Yunliang cannot know my true face. That would be the safest. As for the cultivation materials that Wu Yunliang provided, that would depend on the situation. As long as the first part of Tribulation Sword was in his hands, then he would not need to worry about cultivation materials. Now he finally understood why Wu Chen liked Shi Qianshan in his previous life. It must be because of Shi Qianshan's mission that he had the opportunity to get along with Wu Chen. Even without this mission, Chu Yang would have gone to Iron Cloud Citadel. Because the second part of Tribulation Sword was in an extremely secret place in Iron Cloud Citadel. In his previous life, after Iron Cloud Citadel was destroyed, Chu Yang traveled through Jianghu and found the second part of Tribulation Sword with the help of the sword's energy. Moreover, it was only after 1 year of continuous improvement that he was able to obtain it. Because Tribulation Sword had a strict division of levels, if one's cultivation was not high enough and forcefully touched the second part of Tribulation Sword, there would be a backlash. The next day, early in the morning, Meng Chao Ran stood in front of the purple bamboo forest and looked at his little brother who he had high hopes for. He did not say anything for a long time. After a long time, he finally sighed, "Chu Yang, this time, you will die. Moreover, you will be alone and without help." everything, including food, clothing, shelter, and transportation, including taking risks, you can only rely on yourself. He paused and stared deeply at Chu Yang. You have thought it through? Chu Yang was about to speak when Meng Chao Ran waved his hand and interrupted him. Don't be in a hurry to answer. Think about it carefully. With me here, if you do not want to do something, no one can force you. If you do not agree, I will go find the sect master and ask him to take care of this matter. Chu Yang was moved. When his little brother was faced with the most important decision of his life, Meng Chao Ran, who was always calm and did not care about anything, could not help but reveal his true feelings. There are many things in life that must be done even if you cannot do them. There are also many things that cannot be avoided even if you want to. Master, you also said that we must always have a goal to protect, a person that we care about. Chu Yang said seriously, just like this mission, I am also protecting my heart. I must do it. Meng Chao Ran was silent. After a long time, he slowly walked in front of Chu Yang and patted his shoulder. When he lifted his hand from Chu Yang's shoulder, he stopped in midair and sighed softly. His hand fell back and smoothed out the wrinkles on Chu Yang's clothes. Then, he took 2 steps back and quietly looked at him for a while. Finally, he turned around and looked up at the sky, standing with his hands behind his back. He heaved a deep sigh. Master. Chu Yang's heart felt warm and he could not help but call out. After a long time, Meng Chao Ran waved his sleeve and said in a hoarse voice, Good. I will take you to the gathering clouds peak, to the 7 Shades congregation ground. After he finished speaking, he led the way and did not look back. Meng Chao Ran also did not dare to look back. He was afraid that his little brother would discover the weakness in his heart. He only had 3 little brothers. But in just a few days, his eldest brother had betrayed him and died. Now, his second brother had to rush into the vast and unpredictable future. This journey would be filled with difficulties and hardships, and he would die. How could this master feel at ease with this? How could he endure this? The master and disciple were silent as they walked towards the gathering clouds peak. Meng Chao Ran was in front and Chu Yang was behind. Neither of them spoke. Walking on the mountain path with the biting cold wind in the early morning, the master and disciple both felt that the weather today was so stagnant, almost as if they couldn't breathe. After a long time, seeing that they were approaching the mountain gate, Chu Yang finally said, Master, Tan, he still does not know about this matter. Don't worry. I will take good care of him. Meng Chao Ran said coldly, in the future, I will love and care for him as if he is my only child. After all, if you die, I can only rely on Tan to take care of me in old age. Chu Yang stuck out his tongue and did not dare to speak again, but he was also relieved. Chapter 40. Chu Yang knew that even though Meng Chao Ran's words were not polite, he understood what he meant. So, Tan would certainly be safe and sound with these words of his. When they passed through the gatekeeper saw Meng Chao Ran's cold face and his body was like a bag of explosives. He did not even dare to ask and let them pass. Wu Yunliang was already waiting outside the gate. Today, all the disciples went to Locking Clouds Peak for the test. This was Wu Yunliang's plan to create a private, secret environment for Chu Yang. Seeing Wu Yunliang, Meng Chao Ran's eyes turned cold, but he did not say anything. Wu Yunliang smiled bitterly. He did not say anything else and said, Follow me. He led the way. When they reached the main hall, they passed by the ancestral shrine. Wu Yunliang opened a secret passage and led Chu Yang and Meng Chao Ran in. The path twisted and turned as they went down. It seemed to be very deep. There was a spacious main hall underground. In front of the main hall, there was a stone door made of green jade. The temperature here was freezing cold. Your master and I will wait for you here. Only one person can enter 7 Shades congregation ground at a time. You can go in by yourself. How much good fortune you can obtain will depend on yourself. Go straight from this green jade door. Go through 7 of these doors and you will arrive at 7 Shades congregation ground. Remember, if you cannot withstand the cold, immediately leave. Do not try to be brave. Chu Yang nodded and agreed. He raised his head and looked at the tall green jade door. His eyes shone with a sharp light. His dantian shook as if it felt something. The calamity sword suddenly moved like a tsunami. It was like a child jumping for joy. Seeing Chu Yang open the green jade door and walk in, Wu Yunliang and Meng Chaoran stood side by side without saying anything. After a while, Meng Chaoran said, "Eldest martial brother, do you know who Chu Yang is?" Wu Yunliang was silent and did not say anything. Chu Yang, he was only 3 months old. I picked him up and raised him by my side. After so many years, rather than saying that I am his master, it would be better to say that I am his father, his mother. I gave him his name. Chu Yang, rising sun, represents my life's greatest hope. Eldest senior brother, do you understand? I understand. Wu Yunliang sighed heavily. You don't understand. Meng Chaoran stood there desolately. Suddenly, he turned around and punched Wu Yunliang in the face. Wu Yunliang's body leaned back, but he did not make a sound. Meng Chaoran showed no mercy. Following that, he raised his leg and ruthlessly kicked him in the stomach, causing him to fall to the ground. Then, Meng Chaoran jumped up and rode on his body. His fists rained down like raindrops. Muffled sounds of punches and kicks resounded. Both of them did not say a word. Meng Chaoran of Beyond the Heavens sect grabbed his sect leader's senior martial brother and ruthlessly beat him to his heart's content. From start to finish, Wu Yunliang did not fight back. He did not make a sound. By the time Meng Chaoran stopped after several hundred punches, the sect master of Beyond the Heavens sect's face was already swollen like a pig's head, and his entire body was covered in bruises. The youngest. That's more like you. After 20 years, as your elder brother, I finally saw you get angry. All these years, you have been so quiet, making me feel uncomfortable. Ha ha, cough. Wu Yunliang lay on the ground and coughed. He said, for this one time, I was beaten up by you. Even if it was more ruthless or heavier, it was worth it. I am very happy. If something happens to Chu Yang, I will make you feel that it is worth it every day. I will be so happy every day. Meng Chaoran stood up from his body and said casually, youngest, not only Chu Yang, but also you and I, in this big whirlpool, no one can guarantee that they will survive. This is the fate of our Beyond the Heavens sect. Wu Yunliang stood up with difficulty. Once he moved, his whole body made cracking sounds. He could not help but take 2 deep breaths. He could not help but complain, you motherfucker, you are really not showing any mercy. Meng Chaoran snorted and turned his head away. Looking at the green jade door, his expression was heavy and concerned. His expression was heavy and restrained, and his gaze was extremely complicated. Chu Yang walked forward. On both sides of the stone walls, there were many pearls emitting a misty light. In this underground place, it was like a dream. The calamity sword in his dantian was beating more and more fiercely, as if it was reuniting with a loved one. The second green jade door opened. The cold air was even heavier. If an ordinary person came here, they would have to circulate their martial energy to resist the cold air. However, Chu Yang did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, from head to toe, he felt extremely comfortable. Chu Yang's heart was like a boulder. His feet did not stop moving. The third green jade door. The fourth. Every step Chu Yang took was the same size. His breathing was calm. This showed that his mind was always as calm as ice. He was not disturbed by the calamity sword, which was known as the #1 opportunity in the world. The fifth green jade door opened. The sixth. Chu Yang's eyes did not change. His consciousness suddenly let out a sigh. The empty voice suddenly appeared and sighed faintly. This kind of mind is indeed worthy of the calamity sword. It seems that the hardships and killings in your previous life have turned you from a stubborn rock into a spiritual and clear jade. Chu Yang did not stop moving. However, his consciousness asked calmly, who are you? Are you a human or a ghost? It was this voice. Ever since it arrogantly said the words the heavens can be defied, it did not speak again. No matter how Chu Yang called, it did not come out. Today, under such circumstances, he had actually appeared without a trace. However, The voice disappeared without a trace after Chu Yang asked this question. He didn't answer Chu Yang's question for a long time. It was only when Chu Yang pushed open the green jade door that a tired voice rang out, "I'm very weak right now. Every word I say will cause too much damage. Chu Yang, quickly upgrade to the second fragment of the Calamity Sword." The second fragment? Yes, the second fragment. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth, natural treasures, rare forging materials. The most important thing is the Calamity Sword. These can restore my vitality. The voice became softer and softer. It was as if it would disappear at any time. "Help me. I can help you reverse this fate." The voice disappeared. It seemed to have used up the last of its energy. Chu Yang was already standing in the innermost part of the green jade door. It was empty inside, but waves of cold air, which seemed to be able to freeze people into popsicles and shatter them into pieces, rushed in from all directions. Chu Yang's body was soon covered with a layer of white frost. The Calamity Sword in his dantian started to move intensely. The cold air, which was as boundless as the tide, rushed into Chu Yang's body. It entered his meridians and flowed into the Calamity Sword. For a full 4 hours, Chu Yang couldn't move at all. The cold air surged violently into his body. After 4 hours, the cold air finally weakened. Chu Yang felt that his body had regained the ability to move. He carefully observed his surroundings. Chu Yang took a step to the left. His dantian jumped. It seemed to be stopping him from moving forward. It was still stopping him. Walking to the right, the Calamity Sword let out a burst of joy. After 7 or 8 steps, he walked to the stone wall. The Calamity Sword fell silent. It was an extremely excited silence. It was here. Chapter 41. Chu Yang looked at the stone wall and frowned. "How do I dig out the sword tip? It's buried deep in the ground." At this moment, the Calamity Sword in his dantian suddenly sent out a strong summoning thought. This summoning thought almost made Chu Yang's heart jump out of his throat. He gritted his teeth. Even if he couldn't do it, he had to do it. With a flip of his hand, Chu Yang pulled out the long sword with a swoosh. As he circulated his martial energy, the cold energy that had been swallowed by the Tribulation Sword in his dantian suddenly surged out spontaneously and poured into the long sword. The ordinary steel longsword suddenly became crystal clear and emitted thousands of blazing cold lights. It directly reflected the rock cave, revealing every detail. Cha. Chu Yang shook his hand and tried to stab the sword tip into the bottom of the stone wall. He wanted to test the hardness of the wall before making a decision. But he never expected that when the sword went down, it was like stabbing into a piece of tofu. With a swoosh, the sword went all the way to the hilt. Chu Yang was overjoyed. "Why is it so soft?" He tried to pinch the stone wall with his hand, but it didn't move at all. His fingers hurt from the pinch. He suddenly realized that only this strange cold energy was the nemesis of this stone wall. The cold energy filled the long sword. Chu Yang slanted the sword and the edge of the blade inwards. With a bit of force, the long sword drew a deep mark on the stone wall. It was at least 3 feet long. Then, with 3 swoosh 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 swoosh, he drew out a rectangle. He threw the long sword away and placed his palms on the rectangle that he drew out like a piece of tofu. He sucked hard. With a pop, a piece of rock that weighed hundreds of kilograms fell to the ground. Chu Yang didn't have time to rest. He started again. One by one, the square stones were dug out from the stone wall and stacked neatly on the ground. In a short time, he was already sweating profusely. On the ground, there were close to 100 pieces of stones of the same size. The long sword was inserted again. Suddenly, there was a clang. In his dantian, the Calamity Sword suddenly flew up and circled rapidly in his dantian. Its excitement couldn't be contained. The sword tip. When the last big stone was dug out, Chu Yang's eyes narrowed. Under this stone, a shiny sword tip lay there quietly. It was as long as a palm, and its tip was sharp. White light was faintly discernible on both sides, but it seemed to be shrouded in a layer of pink. This was the unique bloody light of a treasured blade that had killed countless people. A tyrannical aura emanated from the tip of the sword. There was no protective packaging. This sword tip had been here for who knew how many years. However, it was still flickering with a cold light. Furthermore, it was surrounded by a faint halo. Chu Yang felt that his lips were a little dry, and his heart was beating like a drum. He forced himself to calm down. Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the sword point. Chu Yang frowned as soon as he held the sword tip in his hand. Then, he started to sweat profusely. This sword tip had been buried for so many years. It didn't seem to have any temperature. But when he held it in his hand, he realized that it was burning hot. The moment it came into contact with Chu Yang's body that was full of cold energy, the cold and heat stimulated each other. With a bang, a thick fog rose up in the stone chamber. Moreover, a ferocious aura suddenly broke out. The tip of the sword gently trembled in Chu Yang's hand. It seemed as if it was about to cut off his palm and fly away. Chu Yang tried his best to circulate his martial power and resist with all his might. He was extremely puzzled. When he obtained the tribulation sword point in his previous life, such a strange situation didn't occur. Why was everything different now that he had been reborn? The sword tip's struggle grew stronger and stronger. Chu Yang was already somewhat powerless to control it. Finally, the sword tip jumped. Chu Yang frowned. A deep blood groove had already appeared in his palm. The sword tip was about to fly away. If it flew away, he might not be able to find it again in this life. At this moment, a burst of anger suddenly rushed out of his dantian. The tribulation sword spirit rushed out like lightning. It rushed out of his dantian and rushed into his meridians. The next moment, it had already rushed to his palm. Then, a strange force entered the tribulation sword point from Chu Yang's palm. The sword tip, which was struggling to fly away, suddenly calmed down after coming into contact with this force. The cold aura on Chu Yang's body suddenly disappeared, and the hot aura also disappeared in an instant. The tip of the calamity sword in his hand shone brightly, and a blood-red ray of light shot straight up. Then, it disappeared with a swoosh. Then, Chu Yang felt that the sword tip suddenly became docile. The next moment, something even stranger happened. The shining sword tip suddenly and strangely disappeared from Chu Yang's palm. In Chu Yang's dantian, the illusory tribulation sword trembled excitedly. The sword tip suddenly became solid. The sword tip returned to its original position. The next moment, a vast and boundless concept rose in Chu Yang's heart. It was as if someone was chanting, "A ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. What harm is there in slaughtering the world? A sharp wool buried deep does not change. Gather the wind and clouds to become the emperor." Then, a chant suddenly appeared in Chu Yang's heart, along with some messy postures. Chu Yang's heart shook. His mind sank into the realm of consciousness and looked carefully. He suddenly realized that this was the chant of the tribulation heavenly divine technique that he had memorized by heart. A strange force shot out from the tribulation sword point in his dantian and merged into Chu Yang's limbs and bones. Unknowingly, Chu Yang's cultivation suddenly took a big step forward. He had just broken through to the martial warrior level, but he suddenly rose to the martial warrior level. Moreover, he stopped at the peak. He vaguely had the momentum to continue breaking through, but he stopped at the peak and did not move. At the same time, in the realm of consciousness, a figure wearing a feathered robe and a high crown held a sword in his hand and slowly displayed the sword's power. Every movement was executed smoothly like moving clouds and flowing water. Chu Yang's soul was intoxicated watching. He already knew about these sword moves in his previous life, but he did not know why he could not understand their true essence. But now, looking at it, it seemed that there was a mysterious force helping him. He finally understood its mystery. In his previous life, he also obtained the power and chant from the sword tip. It was no different from the current situation. However, the feeling he got in this life was different from the previous one. In his previous life, he felt that there was a barrier. No matter what, he could not fully understand it. It was like there was a thin layer of window paper that could not be pierced through even with all of Nyo Erhu's strength. But now, he had mastered everything through a comprehensive study. Every detail, every tiny change, was like a clear stream that flowed slowly in the bottom of his heart. Every single detail could be seen clearly. This was the recognition of the Tribulation Sword. The privilege of the Tribulation Sword Master. Chu Yang closed his eyes and immersed himself in this strange realm. What he didn't know was that the moment the tip of the Calamity Sword entered his dantian, which was the moment when the 4 lines of the poem suddenly appeared, a colorless and odorless light shot up to the sky from the gathering clouds peak of beyond the heavens sect and exploded. The entire sky of lower 3 heavens was suddenly filled with dark clouds from all directions. In just a moment, the entire sky was covered. The continent suddenly fell into darkness. It was so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. It was now morning. There were still more than 2 hours before noon. At this time, the sky was actually dark. The entire continent was in a panic. Great Zhao Empire, Prime Minister's Manor. From the outside, this Prime Minister's manor was an extremely ordinary official's manor. It did not occupy a particularly large area. Moreover, from the outside, it did not look luxurious. The guards did not seem to be strict at all. However, this was the residence of the ambitious and ruthless Diwu Qingru. When the sky darkened, there was a commotion all around. However, the Prime Minister's manor was completely silent. There was not the slightest bit of chaos. Immediately, in the shortest amount of time, the entire Prime Minister's manor was brightly lit. It was in the morning, and the phenomenon in the sky had happened without warning, but the people here seemed to have been prepared for it in an orderly manner. The lights were turned on. In the study, a 30-year-old scholar was sitting upright. He was dressed in plain and elegant clothes. His face was refined and his eyes were deep like rivers flowing into the sea. It was as if everything in the world was under the gaze of these eyes. Nothing was missed. When the darkness came, he seemed to have a premonition. He stood in front of the window and looked up at the sky silently. Chapter 42. The sky suddenly darkened, but he still stood motionless in front of the window with his hands clasped behind his back. It wasn't until someone tiptoed in and lit the candles that the mansion's lights were lit that he frowned slightly and returned to sit in front of his desk. His eyes gazed into the void as if he was thinking about something. Prime Minister, Official Dong requests an audience. An old man in green silently appeared and respectfully reported. Dong Wufa? Let him in. This person was the most powerful Prime Minister in Great Zhao, Diwu Qingru. Soon, a thin and tall person came in. Prime Minister is well. Sit. Diwu Qingru waved his hand and looked at the flickering candlelight on the table. He quietly said, Official Dong, what is the matter? I came because of the heavenly vision. Dong Wufa's body was tall. His hands were like palm leaf fans. His face was thin and his cheekbones were protruding. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Anyone who saw his eyes would immediately think of the savage scavenging vultures in the desert. This person was the #1 general of the Great Zhao Emperor's army. Dong Wufa's arrival here meant that the leaders of Great Zhao's government were all present. Normally, the leaders of both the military and the government were like fire and water, but here, it was the exact opposite. Dong Wufa was older than Diwu Qingru, but Diwu Qingru was the person Dong Wufa admired the most in his life. Heavenly vision? Yes, it is indeed a heavenly vision. Diwu Qingru's thin face revealed a trace of worry as he spoke softly. After he finished speaking, he lowered his gaze as if he was thinking hard about something. His fingers lightly tapped on the table, making a soft sound. The study room fell into silence. Dong Wufa sat straight across from Diwu Qingru, not daring to disturb his thoughts. After a while, the dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed and the sky became clear again. Diwu Qingru stood up with his hands behind his back and slowly walked to the window. He looked up and muttered, "Half an hour." From the moment the dark clouds came, the sky and earth were covered, until now the clouds have dispersed. Half an hour has passed. This kind of strange phenomenon is rarely seen. Prime Minister, is something important about to happen? Dong Wufa's face changed. Diwu Qingru raised his head to look at the sky. A look of shock flashed across his eyes. Dong Wufa was behind him, but he did not see it. In the blink of an eye, he had regained his composure. He slowly turned around and said with a smile, "There's no other reason." For some unknown reason, Heaven and earth suddenly became chaotic and the mysteries of heaven became chaotic. It's already unpredictable. The future is impossible to predict. Even with the Prime Minister's heaven-defying observation of the stars, you are still unable to predict the future. Dongwu Fa suddenly stood up, his eyes filled with anxiety. No matter what, my great Zhao's momentum of unifying the world is already very clear. Diwu Qingru's voice was soft, but it was resolute and decisive. He spoke with great confidence. Everything will proceed according to the original plan. He paused for a moment, and then added, speed up. Yes. Diwu Qingru's words were very normal, but his resolute tone made Dong Wufa feel relieved. It seemed that as long as Diwu Qingru's words were here, even if the entire sky collapsed, it wouldn't matter. Go. Diwu Qingru smiled warmly. Yes, then I'm leaving. Dong Wufa stood up, turned around, and strode out. Watching his back disappear, Diwu Qingru's smiling eyes suddenly became puzzled and puzzled. He muttered, how could this be? The momentum of the sun had already formed. Why did heaven and earth reverse at this moment, and the opponent actually showed a trace of vitality? He slowly paced back and forth. After a while, his left hand slowly clenched into a fist and placed it in front of his chest. His eyes gradually became fierce. It's just a candle in the wind. One breath can extinguish it. How could I, Diwu Qingru, let you form a prairie fire? His eyes narrowed as if he had made up his mind. He raised his eyebrows and shouted, guards. These two short words were unexpectedly filled with murderous intent. In Iron Cloud Nation, Tai Butian, who was known as the pride of the generation, was also looking at the sky with rapt attention. Her gentle face was full of seriousness that did not match her age. Chaos, everything is in chaos. Tai Butian muttered to himself. He shook his head and laughed involuntarily. This is a game of chess. Diwu Qingru, oh Diwu Qingru, are you still so confident? As he said this, Tai Butian's face, which had always been heavy and faintly worried, suddenly showed a trace of playfulness. His eyebrows curved, and for a moment, he actually looked somewhat charming. Not only the lower three heavens, but even the skies of the upper three heavens and the upper three heavens had become as dark as ink at this moment. In some ancient places that only belonged to legends, there were also signs of restlessness. On the wild ice field, as the sky suddenly turned dark, that kind of huge energy poured into the sky, stirring up the clouds in the sky. A huge iceberg suddenly burst open, and a black shadow shot straight into the sky. He looked around and confirmed that this aura definitely existed. Then, he suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. The day of our 3 stars divine clan's reappearance has finally arrived. He shouted wildly, and suddenly knelt down heavily on the iceberg. He looked up, and his face was already full of tears, tribulation, heaven-defying, the rising sun, the rise of the divine clan. Heaven, oh heaven, this oath has troubled us for tens of thousands of years. Tens of thousands of years. In the mournful cold wind, his voice spread far and wide, and reverberated for a long time in the empty space between heaven and earth. That kind of ancient desolation and the joy of relief was so clear. Children, let's turn this heavens upside down again. Ha ha ha. This black shadow roared loudly, and it was like thunder in the sky. A burst of cheers sounded from all directions. At the same time, the few big clans that dominated the upper 3 heavens and the lower 3 heavens also held secret meetings. There was only one topic in the meeting. It was shockingly similar. Heaven is about to change. The younger generation of our big clans should also take advantage of this time to go out and gain experience. Otherwise, our clans will fall in this great change. Tribulation comes, wind and clouds dance. 10,000 tribulations are destroyed, and the stars cry. Heaven and earth change, and the path of destiny. This is heaven's will. The outstanding young brothers of our clans will immediately enter the world. In this Jianghu area, you must suppress the descendants of the other clans. No matter what you do, you must suppress them. This must be firmly remembered. Heaven and earth change greatly, and the fate of this moment will affect the rise and fall of our big clans. And you, the younger generation, represent where our fate lies. This was something that every clan's leader would tell their juniors with great care. Naturally, there was also the most important sentence, and it was also a sentence that every young man could recite by the ear: find the master of the tribulation sword, and if you can become friends, then help him with all your strength. If you are an enemy, then destroy him at all cost. Heaven and earth shook, and almost all the decisions were made in a short hour. Chu Yang was still underground, and he did not know that because of the birth of the tribulation sword, the entire world had changed. He definitely did not know that because of this incident, the life trajectory of those who would shake the world in the future would be changed. Chapter 43. Chu Yang restored the stone to its original state. When he walked out of the green jade door, the stone room was once again filled with a cold air. It looked the same as before. But Chu Yang knew that it was different. Even though this place was still Seven Shades congregation grounds, it lacked the spiritual energy of the Calamity Sword. In the Seven Shades congregation grounds, there were bound to be extremely cold treasures under the ground. This was a secret that Chu Yang had inadvertently discovered after he had arrived in the upper three heavens in his previous life. Chu Yang had already obtained the Calamity Sword, which was more important than anything else. Therefore, he did not covet the treasure that created Seven Shades congregation grounds. He would preserve this bit of energy for beyond the heavens sect. But the cold air he absorbed was almost the same as the cold air of Seven Shades congregation grounds over the past few decades. Even though it was absorbed by the Calamity Sword, Chu Yang could use it as he wished. It was no different from using his own martial arts. This was the special benefit of the Calamity Sword's master. Of course, if Beyond the Heavens sect was still unable to avoid destruction in the future, then Chu Yang would come and take away the unknown treasure that created Seven Shades congregation grounds. He would not let anyone else have it. When he walked out of the door, he could not help but be surprised. Meng Chao Ran was still standing there with an indifferent expression. But, how did Sect Master become a masked man? Plus, he was wrapped up so tightly that only his eyes could be seen. It seems that his eyes are a bit smaller, only a slit. When Chu Yang appeared, Meng Chao Ran and Wu Yunliang both looked at him. At first glance, both of them had an inexplicable feeling at the same time. The Chu Yang of this moment is definitely different from before he went in. But what exactly was different, they could not tell. It was as if this was a very fleeting feeling. At the same time, Wu Yunliang also felt that Chu Yang was curiously sizing him up. He could not help but blush. How is it? The two asked at the same time. They spoke in unison. Chu Yang stayed in there for a full 6 hours. The two were already shocked beyond word. Generally, the longest time a disciple could stay in the Seven Shades congregation grounds was less than an hour before they had to come out immediately. Otherwise, they would be frozen to death by the extreme cold air. When he came out, his entire body was shivering and his face was covered in white frost. He looked like he was on his deathbed. However, Chu Yang had stayed inside for 6 hours. And, he had come out as if nothing had happened. Both of them looked at Chu Yang as if they had seen a ghost. Chu Yang saw that his master and martial uncle were all staring at him. Their eyes didn't move at all. Not knowing what had happened, he could not help but touch his face subconsciously. If there was a mirror here, Chu Yang's first reaction would be to take it and see if there was a flower growing on his face. This gaze was too strange. Naturally, he didn't know the reaction of entering Seven Shades colony for the first time. What happened? Are you all right? The two of them asked in unison. Nothing. Chu Yang was even more puzzled. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Yang could clearly see that Wu Yunliang's narrowed eyes suddenly widened. Meng Chao Ran coughed a few times and asked seriously, ahem. Your great-uncle means, how is your Seven Shades absolute palm? Nope. But, I feel like I have absorbed a lot of cold energy. Chu Yang said in a daze, let me try. Wu Yunliang and Meng Chao Ran were speechless. Why did you go in? Chu Yang channeled his energy. He deliberately channeled the cold energy stored in the tribulation sword in his dantian. Immediately, the stone room became cold as if it was winter. His outstretched right hand suddenly turned silver white. His left and right hands clapped together. Immediately, Cold energy filled the air. He had only used 30%. However, Wu Yunliang and Meng Chao Ran's eyes widened. How could this be? This was almost the 5th level of 7 Shades Absolute Palm. This was simply inconceivable. That day, when he used 7 Shades Absolute Palm, there was only a faint cold energy. It was clear that he had just started using 7 Shades Absolute Palm. He had not even reached the 1st level. But now, this cold chi was equivalent to reaching the 5th level in a single bound. This was equivalent to the sect leader's younger brother's decades of cultivation. If they knew that Chu Yang had only used 30% of his cold energy, what would they think? The two rubbed their eyes at the same time. Meng Chao Ran was even more shocked by his own disciple. He nonchalantly pinched Wu Yunliang's thigh. Wu Yunliang screamed. That part of his body was already bruised from the beating. Now that it was being twisted, the pain was bone-piercing. He hugged his thigh and jumped up. So it was not a dream. Meng Chao Ran smiled happily. He was very happy that his little brother had such an achievement. You. Wu Yunliang angrily looked at him. Does your thigh hurt? It doesn't hurt. Meng Chao Ran nonchalantly said, I just wanted to see if it was real. But you pinched my thigh. Wu Yunliang angrily said. We have been brothers for so many years. What's the difference between pinching you and pinching me? Meng Chao Ran laughed heartily. He walked forward and patted Chu Yang's shoulder. Not bad. You have made your master proud. Meng Chao Ran had always been mature and prudent. Normally, he would not joke around like this. But right now, he was so happy that he lost his usual self. Wu Yunliang's face was full of anger, but his heart was very happy. It was as if he could see the little brother who had just entered the sect many years ago standing in front of him. He could not help but smile. You were able to absorb so much cold energy and go out on your own. I am relieved. Meng Chao Ran smiled and said to Chu Yang, but when you reach Iron Cloud, you must be as low-key as possible. Do not meddle in other people's business just because you have some skills. Especially when it comes to saving a beauty. If you can avoid it, don't do it. You must know that beauty is the source of disaster. Chu Yang solemnly agreed. Meng Chao Ran's words were indeed priceless advice. The hero saving the beauty repaying the hero with her body, this was something that every young man in Jianghu yearned for. However, this was also the path of death for too many martial artists. Those who dared to openly bully beautiful women were all powerful people. If they were not powerful, then their families were powerful. If you provoked those people and did not have a powerful background, then you could only wander the world to seek refuge. Chu Yang thought to himself, if I were to be like those little brats and do stupid things, then that would be a miracle. But I still don't understand. How can you absorb so much cold energy? Wu Yunliang interjected. His bruised eyes stared at Chu Yang. You are only a first-grade martial warrior. Huh? First-grade martial warrior? Chu Yang innocently opened his eyes and asked, what's wrong? Wu Yunliang was a little confused. His already round eyes almost fell out of their sockets. He remembered that when he saw him a few days ago, he was only a third-grade martial warrior. How did he rise like a rocket in just a few days? How could so many miracles happen in this little boy's body? Moreover, even if he was a first-grade martial warrior, after absorbing so much cold energy, his blood vessels would have been frozen into ice. How could this guy act as if nothing had happened? Looking at Chu Yang's innocent face, Wu Yunliang closed his mouth after a while. He rolled his eyes and said dejectedly, all right, I won't ask any more. You can pretend as much as you want. I only hope that when you reach Iron Cloud, you can pretend like this. I won't fail to live up to your expectations. Chu Yang smiled. His face was full of honesty and sincerity. Wu Yunliang was speechless. Looking at this guy's honest and sincere face, he gritted his teeth and said, whoever believes your face is an idiot. If he were to believe your words, then that person would have already been sold. Chapter 44. After saying goodbye to Wu Yunliang, Meng Chao Ran walked back to Purple Bamboo Garden in silence. Chu Yang knew that Meng Chao Ran was worried about him, but he did not know what to do. He wanted to say something, but he felt that no matter what he said, it would be useless. He would not be able to dispel Meng Chao Ran's worries, so he kept his mouth shut. Just as they reached the entrance of Purple Bamboo Garden, they heard Tan Tan's piercing yell, "Don't run. If you run again, I will turn you into soup." Both of them were startled. They quickly went in and saw Tan Tan standing by the pond with his butt in the air, splashing water everywhere. Then, he cheered and jumped up with a fish in his hand. Holding it above his head, he laughed heartily. Meng Chao Ran was surprised and rushed forward. Chu Yang was also surprised. He did not expect Tan Tan to catch such a good thing. It was a strange fish. Its whole body was black without scales. Its head was round and had no eyes. It was a blind fish. It wasn't big and weighed less than half a catty. "Tan Tan, put it down." Meng Chao Ran's voice was urgent, "Don't kill it." Tan Tan turned his head with a perplexed look on his face. Then, he excitedly shouted, "Master, Chu Yang, look. I caught a strange fish." As he was talking, the fish struggled and escaped from his hand. It drew a beautiful arc in the air and was about to fall back into the water. Meng Chao Ran's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He jumped out and caught the fish before it fell back into the water. Then, he flipped back and grabbed a basin of water. Without stopping, he went back to the pond, scooped up half of the water, and put the fish in. Then, he wiped the water off his face and handed the basin to Tan Tan with a smile. "Put it in your room and look after it. This fish is very precious. Don't let it die." Tan Tan was confused. "Master, what kind of fish is this? It's so small, it's not even enough to make soup." "Make soup? You only know how to eat." Meng Chao Ran was both angry and amused. He patted his head and reprimanded, "This is a priceless treasure. Wouldn't it be a pity to eat it?" "Priceless treasure?" Tan Tan scratched his head and looked at the fish curiously. No matter how he looked at it, it was just a fish. Even though it looked a little strange, it wasn't a dragon. "This is the divine Kai-gathering fish." Chu Yang also squatted down and looked at the fish. "I didn't expect that Tan Tan would find such a treasure. You're really lucky. Divine Kai-gathering fish." "That's right. According to ancient legends, the divine Kai-gathering fish is a treasure of the 3 Stars divine clan. This kind of fish couldn't grow big, their meat wasn't delicious, and they didn't have any powerful skills. However, if he placed the fish in a fish tank and raised it in his room, it would be able to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy to the greatest extent and gather it there. For a martial artist's cultivation, it could achieve twice the result with half the effort. It can be said to be a treasure that martial artists yearn for even in their dreams." Chu Yang said softly. "That's right. The other greatest benefit is that with this fish around, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth absorbed from the surroundings is pure spiritual chi of heaven and earth." This was the hardest part. The existence of this kind of fish had already become a legend. For many years, it had only existed in ancient records, and no one had ever seen it before. "Tan Tan, how did you find out?" Meng Chao Ran was pleasantly surprised as he looked at Tan Tan. "It was just now. Just now, I was fetching water from the pond, and suddenly, the sky turned dark. I couldn't even see my fingers in front of me. I was very scared, so I stayed by the pond and didn't dare to move. After half an hour, the sky started to brighten. Then, I noticed that the soil under the pond was constantly moving, as if something was trying to come out. Then, I kept watching. Tan Tan spread out his hands. Then, this guy came out of the soil. I saw that it looked strange, so I caught it. The sky turned dark." Meng Chao Ran frowned. When the sky changed, he and Wu Yunliang were in the stone room, so they didn't know. Now that he heard Tan Tan's words, he immediately felt that something was wrong. The sky turned dark for half an hour. Then, this fish came out of the soil. Meng Chao Ran looked up at the sky, and his eyes flashed with a trace of worry. The things of the divine clan have not appeared in this world for a long time. Why did this divine Kai-gathering fish suddenly appear? It was morning, so why did the sky suddenly turn dark? Could it be that the sky is going to change? Meng Chao Ran thought hard. After a long time, he finally gave up. However, from his expression, It seemed that he had added another worry to his mind. Chu Yang also blinked his eyes in confusion. He also didn't know that after he obtained the sword point of the Calamity Sword and fused with it, such an earth-shattering feat would happen. Tan Tan, since you found this fish, then let's do it. Then, you can make a fish tank and raise it in your room. Meng Chao Rant's expression returned to normal. Yes, Master. Chu Yang and I have always been in the same room. This way, we can both use it. Haha. Tan Tan laughed happily. From today onwards, Chu Yang and you will sleep separately. Meng Chao Rant's face sank. Why? Tan Tan cried out in disappointment. No reason. Chu Yang has other important things to do. Then let's put this fish in Chu Yang's room. Tan Tan said with a sad face, although I also need it, Chu Yang is about to go out on a dangerous mission. He needs it even more than I do. Even if it can only improve a little, it is still good. Well, it would be best if Chu Yang takes it with him when he goes out. Then, he can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth anytime and anywhere. Chu Yang's heart was shocked. He turned around and looked at Tan Tan. He only felt a surge of warmth in his heart. He didn't speak for a long time. Meng Chao Ran had already explained the benefits of the divine Kai-gathering fish. Although Tan Tan was a little unreliable, he was not stupid. He couldn't not understand. However, he didn't even think of monopolizing such a priceless treasure. He even wanted to give it to him without batting an eyelid. Although he didn't want to give it to him, he still wanted to give it to him. Why? Meng Chao Rant's eyes were full of gratification. I am here with Master. There is no danger. Tan Tan said seriously, Chu Yang needs it more than I do. Silly boy. Meng Chao Ran stretched out his hand and stroked Tan Tan's head. If you want to protect Chu Yang, you must improve your strength first. When your brother needs your help, you will be able to use your greatest strength. If Chu Yang goes out with this thing, it will lead to a fatal disaster. Do you understand? Tan Tan suddenly opened his mouth and hurriedly said, Then I will keep it. Then, he looked at Chu Yang with some embarrassment. Chu Yang, I am not stingy. This, I understand. Chu Yang hugged his shoulder and said deeply, Good brother, Tan Tan, how did you know I was going out? Chu Yang asked. You have been preparing these past few days, but you didn't tell me. I am not stupid, we have been together for more than 10 years. If you don't tell me, it will be dangerous. Tan Tan snorted and said, Moreover, Master has been with you a lot these past few days. If I didn't know, then I would have been stupid. Chu Yang laughed. Tan Tan snorted and suddenly said seriously, Chu Yang, I don't know where you are going. But I will practice seriously and help you in the future. Good. I will wait for you. When the time comes, let us brothers work together to reverse the world. Chu Yang was full of heroic spirit and shouted. He only felt a sense of confidence in his heart. With such a good brother, how can I not work hard? One must know that this reversal will change Tan Tan's fate. Chapter 45. For the next 3 days, Meng Chao Ran gave Chu Yang a comprehensive training. In these 3 days, the master and disciple stayed in the same room. Meng Chao Ran practiced all the skills he knew. He patiently instilled his own Jiang Hu experience and the things he needed to pay attention to. Although Chu Yang was clear about these, he enjoyed the feeling of being cared for by his master. Therefore, when Meng Chao Ran spoke, he listened very seriously. She tried her best to enjoy the warmth of that moment. This warmth, he missed it in his previous life. But in this life, Chu Yang did not want to miss it. He knew that if he did not listen, Meng Chao Ran would not say anything, but his heart would feel very uncomfortable. Chu Yang did not want his master to feel uncomfortable. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. On this day, Chu Yang stepped out of his room and looked at the early morning mist. He took a deep breath. His eyes were somewhat reluctant. Today, he would leave here. This time, he did not know when he would come back, or if he could come back. There was a heavy rain last night. The entire purple bamboo garden was washed clean. Meng Chao Ran said early in the morning that he would go up the mountain to pick herbs. Chu Yang knew that his master could not bear to leave. So he simply hid. A scream came from the toilet. Then, Tan Tan dashed out, and brought along a burst of strong stench. His whole body was filthy. Chu Yang could not help but be stunned. Why was this guy still holding the divine Kai gathering fish in his hand? Tan Tan's face was full of awkwardness and depression as he brushed past him. Then, he rushed into the room and threw the divine Kai gathering fish into the fish tank with a dong sound. Then he took off his clothes and ran out naked. He carried a wooden bucket to the side of the pond and poured water on his head. After several buckets, the stench faded a little. Chu Yang was originally feeling sentimental, but he was confused by Tan Tan. This little guy was like a psychopath. What was he doing? Did he fall into a cesspool early in the morning? Tan Tan finally cleaned himself up. He jumped into the room and put on a set of clothes at lightning speed. Then, he rolled the dirty clothes into a ball and threw them out. Then he came out with a wry smile. His face scrunched up like a bitter gourd. Before he could say anything, he let out a deep sigh. What's wrong? Chu Yang narrowed his eyes. Don't mention it. Tan Tan wanted to cry but had no tears. It turned out that ever since this guy obtained the divine Kai gathering fish, he treated it like a treasure and kept it in his fish tank. From time to time, he would feed them some food and water plants. But a day later, he turned over in the fish tank. No matter how Tan Tan teased her, she didn't respond. It floated in the fish tank with its belly turned over, without any signs of life. When Tan Tan picked him up today, he discovered that his body had become stiff. He sighed sadly and held the fish in his hand. Coincidentally, he was going to the toilet, so he took it with him. He thought that since it was dead, he might as well throw it into the toilet. But after he threw the fish into the cesspool, the most unexpected thing happened. The fish actually scuttled around in the dirty water of the latrine. It was extremely lively. Tan Tan was completely helpless. So, he had no choice but to jump down and grab it again. The most tragic thing was, there was a heavy rain last night. Tan Tan almost swam in the latrine. Cough cough. Ha 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 ha. After listening to this matter, Chu Yang held his stomach and was out of breath. His whole body was twitching with laughter. Even in his dreams, he would never have thought that this guy would make such a blunder. Tan Tan sighed. His face was full of tragedy. He cursed bitterly. How would I know what happened to this dead fish? It stayed in the fish tank, motionless, like a corpse. After I threw it into the latrine, it actually became lively. Does this dead fish only move in smelly places? Chu Yang rubbed his stomach. Snot and tears flowed down his face. You idiot. The divine Kai gathering fish absorbs the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It also needs to digest it. If it absorbs enough, it will stop moving. It will quietly digest the spiritual energy and then move on to the next step. Therefore, during the time when it is digesting the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, it is the best time for a martial artist to use it to cultivate. And you actually threw it into the latrine. Ah! Tan Tan's mouth opened into the shape of a goose egg. Why didn't you say so earlier? You idiot. Chu Yang said resentfully, this divine Kai gathering fish can survive even if it is buried deep underground. How can you die if you are kept in a fish tank? Use that stupid head of yours and think carefully. Besides, it relies on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to live. It is useless no matter what you feed it. Throwing it into the latrine, you really did it. If other people knew that you had a divine Kai gathering fish and threw it into the latrine, I guess all the martial artists in the world would come to kill you. Tan Tan sighed and said, it's not easy for me either. My clothes are ruined. Look at my hands. He extended his hands as he spoke, and put them under his nose to smell them. Then, he exposed an expression as if he wanted to vomit. I will use these hands to eat later. How can I eat like this? You deserve it. Chu Yang thought for a moment. He could not help but laugh. He went into the fish tank and saw the pitiful divine Kai gathering fish jumping back and forth. It was vomiting and having diarrhea. It seemed that this fish was disgusted. Hurry up and change the water, Chu Yang yelled. Tan Tan quickly did as he was told. After changing the water 7 or 8 times, the divine Kai-gathering fish finally calmed down. It lay at the bottom of the water with its belly bulging. It seemed that it had some hidden bitterness. It seemed that this time, it had to take a good rest. Chu Yang did not expect that when he left, he would laugh to the point of tears. It was not until he had walked far away that he heard Tan Tan's hoarse voice shouting, "Chu Yang, take care of yourself. I will come and find you. I will help you." His voice was choked with sobs as he shouted. Chu Yang's footsteps paused, but he did not look back. He just waved his hand, turned around, and disappeared from Tan Tan's sight. "You must not die," Tan Tan screamed. Tears streamed down his face. He suddenly squatted on the ground and sobbed. He did not know what Chu Yang was going to do, but he knew that Chu Yang's mission this time was extremely dangerous. Otherwise, his master would not have reacted like that. Tan Tan was very worried and sad. Chu Yang's heart was a little sour, but he held on and did not look back. Step by step, he left. In the distance, on top of a mountain, Meng Chao ran bathed in the rising sun. His eyes were fixed on his brother as he left step by step. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. In his right hand, there was a piece of paper. On the paper, Chu Yang had written a few words: "Fleeting snow cloud steps. You need to lie down, reverse the flow of your internal energy, and push forward from the last step." Chu Yang floated on the mountain path. On his back, there was a small bag. He walked out of Beyond the Heavens sect alone, embarking on a lonely journey, facing a fate that had become uncertain. Chu Yang's heart suddenly felt a faint sense of melancholy. He suddenly remembered a few words. "This time, I will not look back even if I have to go through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. This time, I will walk the path of Jianghu in death. This time, I will laugh proudly at the world. From now on, I will go straight to the heavens without looking back." These words were from a very popular song in his previous life, Jianghu Journey. Mo Qingwu once played and sang this song. Chu Yang had a deep impression of it. Thinking about it, Chu Yang could not help but smile. He murmured, "This journey, there will be a reversal of the heavens. This journey, there will be a reincarnation of destiny. This journey, I will accompany you to laugh at the world of mortals. This journey, there will be a reversal of the heavens." He softly hummed a few lines of lyrics that he added. He walked out of Beyond the Heavens sect, out of the range of the first garden peak. He did not even look back. The young man's hair casually fell down, covering half of his face. From the fluttering hair, a pair of eyes calmly watched the world. His gaze was like a knife, as if it wanted to split the world. The rising sun shone on his body, dragging his shadow. The dense fog in the mountain forest added a layer of bright red color to his back. Chapter 46. On the main road, a carriage was slowly moving. In front and behind the carriage, 8 riders with cold faces urged their horses forward. An old coachman with gray hair squinted his eyes and held a whip in his hand. His expression was somewhat indifferent as he looked forward. With the crisp sound of the whip, he left a long stretch of road behind. Dust flew everywhere. Inside the carriage, there was an old man with a thin face. He was frowning slightly as if he was thinking about something. This old man was the world's #1 godly doctor, Du Shiqing. This time, he was going from Great Jiao to Iron Cloud Nation. "Senior Du, you only have one mission on this trip to Iron Cloud. That is to use your heaven-reversing divine hand to help the Iron Cloud Nation's dying emperor hold on for a while longer. Do not let him die too early." This was what the Prime Minister of the Empire, Diwu Qingru, had personally received him and solemnly said. Du Shiqing also understood why he wanted the Iron Cloud Nation's emperor to live a little longer. Although Iron Cloud Nation was currently under the Prime Minister's control, the Prime Minister was not the emperor. There were some things that were not legitimate. As long as the Iron Cloud Nation's emperor could hold on for a single breath, then Iron Cloud Nation would never be a monolithic entity. Even if Tai Bu Tian was a genius, as long as he did not dare to kill his own father, then there was nothing he could do. Tai Shicheng's 1 more month of life was 1 more month of time for Great Jiao. It was best to delay until everything was ready and the war broke out. At that time, The biggest flaw of Ironclad Nation's prime minister is not the emperor would be exposed. However, this mission was extremely difficult. Only Du Shiqing knew how difficult it was. Du Shiqing smiled bitterly and sighed. Years ago, when Tai Shicheng was in his prime, he was fighting with Great Zhao on the battlefield. At that time, Diwu Qingru was only a grand secretary with the responsibility of supervising the army. He secretly hired the best archer in the world to assassinate Tai Shicheng. In the midst of the chaos, he shot an arrow at Tai Shicheng. The arrow was poisoned. At that time, Tai Shicheng was blocked by a guard. The arrow first went through the guard's chest and then pierced Tai Shicheng's body. The killing power was not strong. But that poison almost took Tai Shicheng's life. It was also Diwu Qingru who privately hired him with a large sum of money. He wanted him to work for the country, but in the end, he treated Tai Shicheng's injuries. In his entire life, he had only done one thing that violated medical ethics. He had cured Tai Shicheng's poison, but had also planted another incurable chronic poison in his body. The poison slowly eroded Tai Shicheng's body, just like how Great Zhao had slowly eroded Ironclad Nation, injuring him, but not letting him die. These past few years, Diwu Qingru had taken advantage of the war with Ironclad Nation and continued to make contributions. He continued to increase his qualifications and capital. Whether it was the military or the government, Diwu Qingru's contributions were second to none. To this day, he was the number one person in the empire, second only to the emperor. He had been doing meritorious deeds and fighting battles, but he had always allowed Ironclad Nation to retain the power to resist and not be destroyed. He treated Ironclad Nation as his own meritorious service base. Only now did he truly begin to clean up Ironclad Nation because he was already at the peak. With Diwu Qingru's current power, even the emperor would not be able to do anything to him. Diwu Qingru's use of trickery had reached the acme of perfection. At this point, Tai Shicheng's body was beyond saving. He only had one breath left. If it were not for the amazing Bu Tian Tai, perhaps Ironclad Nation would have already become Great Zhao's territory. And now, he still had to clean up after what he had done. Du Shiqing sighed deeply. The road ahead was long. Chu Yang stood on top of a mountain. Using the cover of the dense forest, he quietly watched the slowly approaching group of horses. His palm slightly tightened, and a piece of paper with the words Ironclad Nation has hired the number one genius doctor in the world, Du Shiqing, to go to Ironclad Citadel. Early in the morning, he will pass by Evil Tiger Ridge. Then, without pausing, his body shot through the forest like a meteor and rushed down the mountain. This was the path he had planned for a long time ago. Du Shiqing was the key to it. To enter Ironclad Nation and reverse fate, it was not as simple as entering a country. After entering, he needed to be valued. Besides being valued, he also needed to gain trust. Only after gaining trust could he gain power. All of this had to be done in a short period of time. At the latest, he needed 2 years to complete the journey that an ordinary person would take in a lifetime. Chu Yang's task was not easy. But he did not look back. Du Shiqing was the beginning of Chu Yang's plan. Neigh. The strong horse let out a long neigh and stopped its steps. In front of the carriage, a young man had already landed. He was dressed in black and had a handsome face. His expression was calm with a hint of excitement as he eagerly looked at the carriage. Who is it? The 8 riders reined in their horses at the same time. 3 swords and 5 sabers left their sheaths at the same time. Is the person in the carriage the number one genius doctor in the world, the one known as the compassionate saint, Du Shiqing? The young man in black's eyes were filled with excitement. He was full of gratitude and respect. Looking inside the carriage, he did not seem to notice the shining sabers and swords around him. Who are you? The leading rider's eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. He coldly looked at the young man and did not let down his guard. At the same time that the remaining few used their auras to lock onto the young man, they spread out without leaving a trace and guarded the carriage tightly from all directions. Am I? The young man took another step forward. He appeared to be very anxious. Whether I am or not, it has nothing to do with you. The leading rider coldly said, Back off. He could see that the young man did not have any evil intentions, but this was a very important matter. He had to be careful. "If you are Senior Du, please come out and meet me," the young man said unyieldingly. Presumptuous. With a loud shout, 3 sabers flew out at the same time and chopped toward the young man. The young man in black seemed to be startled. Suddenly, his face showed a hint of anger. He twisted his body and dodged left and right between the sabers. The sabers were like a waterfall, but he was able to move freely between the sabers. He suddenly attacked. His hands were like the claws of an eagle. With a clang, a saber fell to the ground. The leading rider also felt his wrist go numb. His saber almost flew out of his hand. He could not help but be startled. He quickly dismounted and shouted, "Form a formation to meet the enemy." The 7 riders dismounted at the same time. They were ready to fight. The sabers were faintly discernible. "Wait!" Du Shiqing shouted from inside the carriage. Then he calmly said, "Young master, this old man is Du Shiqing. May I know what is the matter?" After he finished speaking, he lifted the curtain and revealed his face. "Senior Du, be careful. This person's origin is unknown. He has ulterior motives." 2 guards immediately stood guard in front of the carriage with their swords. "It really is divine, Dr. Du." The young man in black was so excited that his face turned red. He suddenly ignored the sabers and swords in front of him and stared at Du Shiqing. Step by step, he walked forward without any defense. After 2 steps, his body touched the saber. The leading rider did not intend to withdraw his saber. He just stood there. The young man felt the stinging sensation of the saber piercing his skin. He looked down and smiled embarrassedly. Suddenly, he bowed deeply toward Du Shiqing. This strange action caused everyone to be inexplicably flabbergasted. "Senior Du, do you remember 8 years ago when you practiced medicine to help the world? At that time, under the evil Tiger Ridge, the 2 countries were at war. Senior Du's kind hands saved the dying and helped the wounded. That time, when you came out to pick herbs, you passed by a mountain village and saved a mountain couple." Chapter 47. And Iron Cloud Nation's Emperor Tai Shicheng's injury was treated by him during that time. "Senior Du not only saved my parents, but when he saw that my family was poor, he did not ask for anything. Before he left behind an ingot of silver. Senior Du's great kindness is something my family will never forget." The young man in black saw that Du Shiqing seemed to be thinking and could not help but smile even more. His tone became even more emotional. "At that time, my parents were seriously ill and the family had no means of support. We only survived because of the ingot of silver Senior Du left behind. Senior Du's kindness to my family is as high as the sky and as deep as the earth. So that's how it is." Du Shiqing seemed to vaguely remember such a thing, but he had no recollection of it. It was as if he only remembered it because the other person mentioned it. However, he had done so many things like this in his life. Even if he did remember, it would have already been blurred by now. However, it had to be said that the feeling of being able to repay a debt of gratitude and being recognized by everyone in the world made everyone feel very happy. "Yes, regarding this matter, my late father Chu Dazhi told me more than once that when I grew up, I must find Senior Du and repay this kindness. Before my late father died, he was still brooding over not being able to repay Senior Du." The young man in black said with tears in his eyes, "The heavens have taken pity on me. Today, I finally found out about Senior Du's whereabouts and was able to talk to him face to face to express my gratitude. If my late father knew about this, he would definitely be very happy." As he spoke, his eyes became red. "This Du appreciates your kind intentions, father." Du Shiqing could not help but have a feeling of passing clouds. He sighed and said, "The past is gone." What is it?" "Your father has already passed away?" "Yes, my late father went into the mountains to hunt a tiger 3 years ago. Unfortunately," the young man in black said with a choked voice. "Unfortunately, your father was a good man." A good man. Du Shiqing actually did not remember this until now. However, from the other person's description, this father was poor and was saved by him. For many years, he did not forget this kindness and never forgot to repay it. Even in his death, he did not forget to repay this kindness. Moreover, going into the mountains to hunt a tiger and fighting a tiger was truly a good man. Such a good man was, of course, a good man. Unconsciously, Du Shiqing also felt that he had done a good deed. Although Dong Xuebing's memory is blurry, he is still a teenager, and he can't fake his feelings for her. Senior Du finally remembered. The black-clothed youth shouted happily, "My name is Chu Yang. I have seen Senior Du before. Time, you're all grown up now." Du Shiqing stroked his beard and smiled. He felt very comforted. At this moment, there was a feeling of having a descendant of an old friend. He could not help but sigh. If your father could see your skills today, he would be smiling like a spring. Yes. Before the new year, this humble one followed my master and practiced martial arts. Chu Yang looked a little embarrassed as he said, "Cough, cough. I've finally met Mr. Du today. I also know that Senior Du is going to Iron Cloud this time. Although I am not strong enough, I am willing to escort Senior Du all the way and do my best." "There is no need for that, right?" Du Shiqing said with some hesitation. "Could it be that Senior Du does not even want to give me a chance to repay you?" Chu Yang said sadly, "I know my martial arts are low, but this is my sincerity. I want to fulfill my father's dying wish. I ask Senior Du to fulfill my wish." At this point, there were no more questions. Even the 8 horsemen's attitude toward Chu Yang changed greatly. One of them even patted Chu Yang's shoulder and said with a smile, "Good, you say your martial arts are low? The 3 of us were not able to stop you." Chu Yang said humbly, "That was because big brothers let me go. Seeing my age, you did not want to use too much force. Otherwise, wouldn't you have cut me in half?" The horsemen all laughed. Although everyone knew that Chu Yang did not hold back, it was also true that he did not use his full strength. They liked this guy's tactfulness. Receiving someone's favor, not forgetting it, persevering to fulfill his father's dying wish, this was a great display of loyalty and filial piety. Such a person, no matter where he went, would be welcomed. "Very well, since we are old friends, you should follow me. When we reach Iron Cloud, we will see if there is an opportunity to find a promotion for you," Du Shiqing said with a smile. The 8 horsemen all looked at Du Shiqing with admiration. Du Shiqing's recommendation, especially at a time when Iron Cloud Nation needed his help, how rare was this? It could be said that as long as Du Shiqing opened his mouth, this young man's future would be bright. "I do not dare. I am not interested in those things," Chu Yang said casually with a disheartened expression. "I only need to confirm that Senior Du is safely in Iron Cloud. Then I can leave with peace of mind. Although I am not a good person, it is better to stay away from those things. I don't want to lose my head for no reason at any time." How could Chu Yang not know that this was Du Shiqing's last test? Du Shiqing put on an expression as if he did not care about fame and reputation. He also put on an expression as if he was trying his best to hide his despair. Hearing this, even the old coachman's expression relaxed. Du Shiqing shook his head and laughed. "Very well, since that is the case, you can follow me." Chu Yang's sadness immediately turned into joy. He jumped up and said, "Thank you, Senior Du." Du Shiqing saw that this young man was so happy and could not help but laugh heartily. Little did he know that this young man, who was honest, kind, filial, and righteous in his eyes, was so happy that he almost vomited. Du Shiqing also did not know that the so-called sincere memories and last words were all fake. Chu Yang did not even know his own identity, so how could he have a Chu Dazhi? Chapter 48. Oh! Everyone, including Du Shiqing, let out a long sigh as if they understood everything. Then, they looked at Chu Yang with sympathetic eyes. This kind of snatching away someone's love was too common. Especially between martial brothers, there were some things that could not be said. Chu Yang cooperated and put on a painful expression. His 2 hands hugged his head and curled up. His 10 fingers tightly grabbed his hair and even pulled out a lot of hair. It was enough to show how much pain he was in. Sigh. Du Shiqing sighed and said heavily, "This matter, no one should mention it again." The 8 riders agreed together. Even the old coachman's eyes softened as he looked at Chu Yang. It was no wonder that when she asked him that day, this little guy showed a desperate and helpless look. So that was the reason. "Thank you." Chu Yang lowered his head and gratefully said in a hoarse voice. Then, he said in a painful tone, "Once I complete my father's last wish and repay Mr. Du's great kindness, I will disappear from this world. Ha, from now on, I will be alone in the mountains. A man does not have to worry about not having a wife." Du Shiqing patted his shoulder and comforted him. "You don't have to care so much." Chu Yang nodded heavily and sighed, but did not say anything. It was clear that his mood was difficult to get rid of. After this matter, the attitude of the people in the group toward Chu Yang changed greatly. There was a faint sense of closeness. He was loyal, filial, infatuated, and endured humiliation. Such a rare young man, Chu Yang's performance had completely conquered these people. Even Chu Yang himself did not know that he had gained so many advantages in just a moment. The leader even sighed and patted Chu Yang's shoulder. "Little brother, you don't have to be like this. Look on the bright side. As long as you have money, there are many beautiful girls in the kill." Chu Yang nodded sorrowfully. He raised his head and forced a smile that was uglier than crying. Even though no one said anything, the way they looked at Chu Yang softened a lot. The weak, no matter what time it was, would always arouse people's sympathy. 34 Even the old coachman who had always been by the side of the horse sighed deeply. He lifted the sole of his shoe and tapped the ash from his cigarette. That pair of eyes that had seen through the world also seemed a little misty. Chu Yang sighed, but in his heart, he knew that Du Shiqing's test was over. The only thing left was to go to Ironcloud Nation. Ironcloud Nation's old foxes were not as easy to fool as Du Shiqing. Du Shiqing was a divine physician of his generation. Legend has it that no matter what kind of illness it was, when it came to him, it would be cured. However, he was just a doctor, and his medical skills were superb. Everyone was polite to him, so he might not have much experience in dealing with people. Chu Yang also knew that a few years later, Du Shiqing's reputation would be ruined because of this incident in Ironcloud Nation. Later on, for some unknown reason, the Ironcloud monarch's illness was exposed. It turned out that Du Shiqing had done this many years ago. This matter caused a huge uproar in the entire lower three heavens. Du Shiqing also exploded because of this matter. Faced with the accusations of all the heroes of the world, he admitted to this matter and silently committed suicide. Just like that, a divine physician of a generation was reduced to dust. Perhaps he was just a doctor, or perhaps he had no other choice, but what was done was done. Chu Yang did not feel any special pity for him. Along the way, he had deceived and used Du Shiqing, so he did not feel any guilt. However, in these past few days, he could see that this kind divine physician was not a bad person. Perhaps it was just a confrontation between two countries, each with their own master. After all, he was a citizen of Great Zhao. In the end, perhaps he was just a sacrifice, a tool used by Diwu Qingru to appease the people after he conquered Ironcloud Nation. As for these 8 riders, after careful observation, Chu Yang was finally certain. Among these 8 people, there was no one from Golden Horse Riders Department. From the looks of it, the 8 of them were pure warriors and did not seem to be scheming at all. Furthermore, their cultivation wasn't very high. They should be around grade 5 martial warriors. These kinds of people would be more than enough to deal with a small thief, but if they wanted to deal with a master, they would not be able to do so. It seemed that Du Shiqing was just pretending. The only real expert was the old man driving the carriage. Perhaps Du Shiqing himself was a master, but whether it was in the previous life or the present, Chu Yang had never heard of this kind divine physician's martial arts. "Chu Yang, how old are you?" While Chu Yang was silent, the mysterious old coachman came over with his smoking pipe and asked such a question. 10. Chu Yang was afraid that someone would come to talk to him, because his grief was just a pretense. If he talked too much, what would he do if he was exposed? 10R. It seems that you know about the matters between men and women quite early. The old coachman revealed a wretched smile, revealing 2 rows of yellow teeth. However, a light flashed in his eyes, making Chu Yang realize that this old coachman was not here to make small talk. This kind of thing is hard to explain. In fact, even now, I am still confused. Chu Yang sighed and said with disappointment, in this world, there are many things that are always peaceful, but once lost, they become unforgettable, haha. You are right. After the old coachman heard these words, he was silent for a long time. Then, he smiled faintly and said, always peaceful, it becomes unforgettable. It's late, let's go to sleep. After saying this, he sat next to the fire and stared blankly at the flickering flames, not saying a word. The flickering flames reflected in his dim yellow eyes, and for a moment, he seemed to be in a daze. This actually made Chu Yang a bit surprised. This was the last time this old coachman came to test him. Chu Yang was very clear about this, but why did he give up after he said such a sentence? After thinking about it carefully, Chu Yang sighed. It's in a peaceful and quiet place that things become unforgettable. It turned out that this saying wasn't something that was said casually. Just like in his previous life, he and Mo Qingwu had gone through many earth-shattering events together. But after Mo Qingwu passed away, he couldn't help but recall those memories. What lingered in his heart for a long time was still that simple warmth, that calm gentleness. Not those so-called major events. Who hasn't been young before? Who hasn't been young before? Chu Yang was thinking about this when he suddenly heard the old coachman murmur a sentence that was actually the same as what he was thinking. He could not help but look at each other in surprise. The old coachman turned his head and looked at him with a smile in his eyes. Old coachman Gao, don't talk about youth, it's already winter here. The leader of the knights held a wine bag and laughed loudly, raising it up and gulping it down. The other 7 knights also burst into laughter. Old coachman Gao snorted and suddenly flicked his pipe. A spark flew out and landed directly in the wine bag that the big man had just moved away from his mouth. The wine bag still had more than half of the wine. When such a weak spark flew in, the flame actually jumped up a few feet high with a bang. The leader of the knights was careless and half of his hair was burned. For a moment, the smell of burnt pig feet filled the air. He could not help but yell and angrily said, "Old coachman Gao, are you serious?" Old coachman Gao snorted and slowly walked away with his pipe in his hand. The leader of the knights spat and angrily watched him walk away, but he did not dare to speak again. Chu Yang's eyes suddenly shrank. Looking at the receding figure of old coachman Gao, his eyes revealed a trace of fear. Old coachman Gao's move looked simple. But Chu Yang knew that it was not easy. Half of the wine bag was at least 3 or 4 pounds of wine. Even if a torch was thrown in, it would be immediately extinguished. Let alone a small spark like this. This required good eyesight, timing, and a strong martial power. These were not the things that Chu Yang was most afraid of. Chapter 49. This tall old man was clearly a human. How could he know how to control fire like the divine clan? Could it be that Du Shiqing's bodyguard's background is not simple? Also, wasn't this journey a bit too peaceful? While Chu Yang was thinking, the calamity sword in his dantian suddenly jumped. A sense of extreme danger rose from his heart, all the hairs on his body stood on end. His eyes turned cold, and he didn't even turn around to check. His body spun, rolled, and bounced up. He made a turn in the air, and immediately moved from the side of the fire to behind a tree. The movement of his body at this moment was almost unbelievable. Immediately after, there was a sharp whistling sound. A large stone slab, several feet wide, fell from the sky. It smashed towards Du Shiqing's position. His grasp of the position was extremely precise. Du Shiqing was within the stone's attack range. Right in the middle, old man Gao shouted angrily. His old body suddenly became as agile as a leopard. He leaped forward, but it was too late. At this moment, Chu Yang suddenly appeared next to the stone slab. A sword appeared out of nowhere in his hand and stabbed forward like a poisonous snake. The tip of the sword pierced the edge of the stone slab like a poisonous dragon. Dang! This large stone slab was originally fiercely spinning as it smashed down, but when this sword appeared, it just happened to stab into the gap between the spinning, causing the speed of this large stone slab to slow down by a tiny bit. It was like a huge mountain falling right onto the tip of a lever. The subtlety of this moment was indescribable. Immediately after, the stone slab's counterforce exploded like thunder. Chu Yang, who was holding the sword, felt as if his chest was hit by the stone slab. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flipped back in the air. But in the end, he managed to buy some time. Even if it was an insignificant amount of time, a normal person would not even be able to blink. But with this slight delay, Old Man Gao's body was already in between the stone slab and the ground. He angrily shouted and punched the air. A white light flashed on his fist, and the several thousand jin stone slab was suddenly smashed into pieces like a rain of stones. Du Shiqing was safe and sound. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, pitch-black arrows rained down from the top of the mountain, shrouding the area in all directions. Formation. Meet the enemy. The leader of the knights shouted, and the 8 of them rolled on the ground in an orderly manner. They nimbly moved to the side of their war horses, and in the next moment, a round shield appeared in their hands. Although they dodged quickly, there was still a knight who was hit in the shoulder and calf at the same time. The iron arrow pierced through the air with pieces of flesh and blood. Before he could finish his scream, 3 of his companions' shields had already covered his entire body. Thud, thud, thud. The iron arrows formed an iron curtain in an instant. Puff puff. The sound of the arrows piercing the ground was like rain hitting a sandpit. The ground of several hundred feet had turned into a huge hedgehog. Old Man Jiao screamed, and his body turned into a grey whirlwind. 20 or 30 arrows were caught in his hand before they hit the ground. With a shake of his hand, they turned into dozens of black lightning bolts and were reflected back. He did not look at the result. Without stopping, he picked up Du Shiqing. His body flashed like a grey fog, and he was already next to the carriage. In the next moment, Du Shiqing was stuffed back into the carriage. With a series of popping sounds, the incoming arrows suddenly changed direction and rained down on the carriage. The huge force shook the whole carriage, but not a single arrow could penetrate it. This carriage was actually specially made. In the darkness of the forest, there was the sound of arrows being deflected by the tall old man hitting a tree. There was also a short scream. Old Man Gao's body flashed in the next moment. His face was covered with a layer of green. His first reaction was not to kill the enemy, but to look at Chu Yang's direction. Only he knew how difficult Chu Yang's sword was. If it was not for that sword, everything would have been unimaginable, whether it was the timing, the position, the control of the power, or the choice of direction to dodge, they were all extremely difficult to come by. That sword was simply a stroke of genius. This young man was only a martial warrior. Even if he was a peak martial master, his sword would be useless against such a huge rock falling from the top of the mountain. However, Chu Yang was able to use that sword to block it. Even though it was only a small gap, it was enough to buy some time. After that sword strike, an ordinary green steel sword was not damaged at all. The price was only a mouthful of blood. This was simply unimaginable. The opponent's choice of timing was also very strange. They were already in Iron Cloud Nation's territory. Nothing happened along the way, but they were ambushed here. Moreover, the opponent did not ambush them in the middle of the night, but at dusk. Everything happened so suddenly that it felt as if a group of bandits had suddenly found a fat sheep and decided to make a last-minute robbery. Even Old Man Jiao, who had been in Jianghu for his entire life, was not prepared. But Chu Yang was able to use that sword strike in such a hurry. It was a sword strike filled with a mystical aura. It was as if everything had been rehearsed thousands of times in advance. Old Man Jiao knew that no one would rehearse like this. This was not a coincidence, and it was not premeditated. When he looked at where Chu Yang was standing, he found that Chu Yang, who was originally rolling there, was nowhere to be seen. The 8 knights formed a shield formation and moved slowly. Gradually, they arrived near the carriage and protected the entire carriage. Old Man Jiao wanted to chase after them, but after thinking about it, he did not move. He only ordered the carriage to slowly move away. The horses that pulled the carriage had already turned into 2 huge iron porcupines. Half of the horses of the 8 riders were also shot dead. Old Man Gao's body swayed. Bang! 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 One by one, the horse corpses were thrown into the air. In a very short time, the corpses of the horses were lined up in a row, blocking the view from the forest. Then he covered his chest with both hands and was on full alert. He looked around vigilantly and retreated step by step. Their mission was only to protect Du Shiqing, not to kill the enemy. While he was doing this, the enemy did not react at all. Up until now, the attacker did not even say a word. Except for the 2 screams at the beginning, everything was like a pantomime. The rain of arrows stopped abruptly. Everything returned to silence, as if nothing had happened. From the extreme intensity to the extreme silence, there was no buffer at all. As the rain of arrows disappeared, the boundless twilight reigned over the earth. The world was suddenly filled with an oppressive atmosphere that made it hard for people to breathe. The enemy's attack was not limited to this. This was something that everyone was clear about. But who was the enemy? Which side did they belong to? Was it Great Zhao? Iron Cloud? Or Limitless? Or were there others? All of this was hidden in the fog. But no matter which side it was, it must have been premeditated for a long time. It was not until they retreated 10 feet that there was a reaction from the forest. After a series of strange noises, a sharp sound pierced through the air. A black shadow shot out from the forest like an angry dragon. With an unstoppable momentum, it arrived in front of the carriage in the blink of an eye. The void behind the black shadow was already trembling from this tyrannical power. 1 arrow. However, the body of the arrow was actually 3 feet long. As if it came from hell, it was full of the smell of death. Under the cover of night, it viciously shot towards the carriage. Chapter 50. Siege Crossbow. Bastard. Manager Gao roared. In the next moment, a faint flame appeared in his hand as he threw a punch. Control fire. With a bang, the tip of the black dragon-like arrow exploded. Sparks flew in all directions. However, the arrow's momentum was still the same. It did not stop and continued to charge forward. After the first punch, Manager Gao roared and threw 18 punches in a row. Each of his fists carried this strange ability to control fire, and each of his fists fiercely struck the tip of the ballista. He was like a hammer, constantly striking the tip of the huge arrow. In other words, the arrow was like a hammer, constantly hitting the tall old man's fists. Qi filled the air and shot in all directions. In the night sky, it was as if hundreds of thousands of fireworks were blooming at the same time. Broken pieces of wood flew in all directions. Manager Gao threw a punch and then shouted, 18 punches. After 18 yells, the 30-foot-long ballista was now only 10 foot long. Manager Gao's back shook and he was forced to take a few steps back. His back hit the carriage with a heavy thud. However, the crossbow in front of him finally lost its momentum and fell to the ground. The air was filled with the acrid smell of burning flames. Manager Gao's chest heaved up and down as he stared at the forest. In the next moment, his head tilted and he spat out a mouthful of blood. As he spat out the blood, a dark red color appeared on his face and disappeared. His breathing also calmed down. He didn't expect that the enemy would install a siege crossbow in this place. Caught off guard, even with his cultivation base as a saber grandmaster, he still suffered internal injuries from the powerful impact of the siege crossbow. Siege crossbows were specially made by the army to break open the gates of a city. Generally, they were more than 10 meters long and were made directly from a black ironwood tree trunk. The tip was covered with a huge sharp iron sheet. They were usually soaked in a pool of black oil. Only when attacking a city would they be used. Every time a shot was fired, it required at least 100 strong men to pull the bowstring together. Only then could the shot be used to determine the outcome of a battle. The power of the siege crossbow was enormous and indestructible. Once the siege crossbow was used, then an ordinary city would be destroyed without a doubt. After a moment of silence, a clear clapping sound came from the direction of the dense forest. A voice said, as expected of the fire saber sect, "You are indeed impressive. A single ballista could have broken through the city gates, but you blocked it all by yourself. I'm impressed." Following this voice, 8 people quietly appeared from different positions at the same time. Wearing black clothes and a mask, his eyes were cold and sharp. He walked step by step towards the tall old man. The tall old man's pupils shrank. "Who are you people?" One of them snorted coldly and said, "Rumor has it that Fire Saber Great Master Jiao Wei Cheng has already left Jianghu. I didn't expect it to be false. The dignified Saber Master actually became someone's bodyguard and lived a carefree life like a dog. How enviable. Jiao Wei Cheng, where is your saber?" Manager Gao's body shook. He suddenly straightened his back. His originally stooped body suddenly straightened up. His eyes flashed with a sharp light. He coldly said, "Since you know me, Jiao Wei Cheng, then you must not be a nobody. Take off your mask." The last sentence, "take off your mask," was an earth-shattering roar. That person was not moved at all. He stood up straight and said indifferently, "Jiao Wei Cheng, if you take Du Shiqing back, we will not pursue you. Otherwise, today will be the day you, the Fire Saber Great Master, die." Manager Gao looked up to the sky and laughed. Such big words. "Today, I want to see how you will make me stay here." Another person in black sneered, "Fire Saber Great Master? Is it that great?" Suddenly, he shouted, "Everyone, attack together. One of you will tie down Jiao Wei Cheng. The other two, immediately kill Du Shiqing." The 8 people shouted and suddenly unsheathed their sabers and swords and rushed forward at the same time. Manager Gao had already seen that these people's martial arts were not very high, but they were very average. They should all be martial masters. They were still a big step away from him. But this side-by-side charge suddenly brought with it the bitter killing intent of a magnificent army charging at the same time. "You are from Iron Cloud's military?" The opponent's aura was fierce and majestic. Even if a normal martial artist was stronger than them, it would be difficult to bring out this kind of aura. Manager Gao suddenly had an idea and asked loudly. The opponent did not answer. In a flash, they closed in and slashed down with their sabers. Manager Gao shouted, "Protect the carriage." With a flick of his wrist, a dark red saber suddenly appeared. The moment it appeared, saber light filled the sky like a curtain of rain. However, in this curtain of rain, there were flames floating in all directions. Dang dang dang. The sound of weapons hitting each other was endless. In a flash, the 7 people were engaged in a fierce battle. The other 2 people did not care about the battle. With long swords in their hands, they rushed toward the carriage like crazy tigers. If there were no obstacles, Manager Gao was confident that he could kill these 8 people one by one. However, if he wanted to kill all of them in one go, it would be impossible. Moreover, under the attack of the siege crossbow, he had already suffered serious internal injuries. He was even more powerless. At this moment, one of the opponents was holding him back. The other 2 people and the 8 guards could not stop them. He could not help but feel anxious. Chu Yang had already sneaked into the mountain forest when the siege crossbows were opened in a domineering manner. He was like a lone wolf that had pounced into the desert and returned to his territory. After thrusting out the sword, he immediately rolled back. Borrowing a mouthful of blood, he spat out the shock of his internal organs caused by the extreme pressure in his body. Then, he kicked off with his 2 feet, stirring up a cloud of dirt on the ground. Using the dirt as cover, his body quickly wriggled on the ground a few times like a large snake, and he had already returned to the back of the big tree from which he had attacked. Then, with a strange movement, he moved from one tree to another. His body stretched out and he was already at the waist of the tree. Using the branches as cover, he continuously dodged more than 10 trees and went deep into the forest. The whole process was as smooth as the wind blowing through the trees. It was natural. As his body moved, even the branches next to him did not sway in the slightest. Even if it was a top assassin, if they saw Chu Yang's movements at this moment, their eyeballs would fall to the ground. This was the path Chu Yang had chosen a long time ago. When he chose this path, it was even long before the attack. His habit was that no matter where he rested, he would first choose a path of retreat and a path of attack. And his position was between these 2 lines. He could attack if he advanced and defend if he retreated. This kind of ambush was bound to be a large number. Just by looking at the rain of arrows, he knew that passively defending was not a solution. Even if the enemy wanted to exhaust them, they could still exhaust them. The only way was to attack and resolve the crisis. Du Shiqing could not die. Du Shiqing had manager Gao to protect him. At least, he would not be in danger for a while. Chu Yang was not worried. Therefore, after he made that critical strike, he immediately decided on his next course of action. Into the forest. Chapter 51. The first enemy he saw was a man covered in a layer of trees. Only his eyes could be seen. These two eyes were cold and calm, without any expression. Just by looking at his eyes, Chu Yunsheng knew that this person was a warrior who had survived hundreds of battles. This kind of person only has one creed in life: kill the enemy and complete the mission. On the ground in front of him, there was a huge crossbow buried in the ground. On top of it, there were 10 shiny black arrows, ready to fire at any moment. Chu Yang held his breath and moved forward slowly. Now, his body had already reached the top of the tree. Like a silent ghost, he moved forward strangely under the cover of the thick branches. Chu Yunsheng looked down from above. Who knew how many of these shiny arrowheads there were in the vicinity? There were at least 50 people. This was clearly a premeditated ambush. How did the enemy know that this group of people would be resting here? And they even buried the crossbows in advance. Chu Yunsheng looked at the positions of the enemies. Chu Yang frowned. The enemy's positions were too accurate. Every enemy's position was within the line of sight of at least 3 people. This way, they would be able to coordinate with each other. If they were discovered, they would be able to provide support. This was a formation that only the most elite soldiers in the army could set up. If they tried to ambush any one of them, they would be discovered by the other 3. This was because even though the other party's hiding spot was absolutely hidden, to their own people, there was no blind spot in their line of sight. If they wanted to wipe out this group of people silently, there was no other way other than to ambush them. In the middle of the forest, behind a bush, a blurry figure was lying motionless. From the looks of it, he was no different from the others. However, Chu Yang could tell at a glance that this person was a very important person. Because of his position, at least 10 of his companions could see him at the same time. The rest of them could only see at most 5 people. Furthermore, he was in the middle. It was as if he was under the protection of his own people. Beside him, hidden by the branches, there was a huge crossbow. Siege crossbows. At this moment, the tall old man's conversation with the 8 people outside the forest could be heard clearly. If you take Du Shiqing back now, we will not pursue you. Chu Yang's heart suddenly moved when he heard these words. He already had a rough idea of where these people came from. These people had siege crossbows and were very disciplined. They definitely had a military background. Chu Yang's body floated like a ghost as he silently approached this person. Suddenly, his 2 legs kicked off the ground, and he dived down from the top of the tree like lightning. His 10 fingers were like furrows, and he fiercely grabbed at Chu Yang like an eagle hunting for prey. His black clothes were torn to shreds by the arrows, but his skin was not scratched at all. They had clearly seen an arrow pierce through his body, but the next moment, that arrow had already pierced through his clothes. Chu Yang's momentum did not change at all. He was actually moving faster and faster. These people were clearly wary of the person Chu Yang was carrying. They tried their best to avoid that person with every arrow they fired. This made it very convenient for Chu Yang. It also made him even more certain. This person's identity was definitely not simple. Chu Yang's feet continued to stomp on the trees as he shuttled through the dense forest. He was actually as fast as lightning. Swish, swish, swish. Most of the arrows nailed into the trees. In just a breath's time, Chu Yang's afterimages were still moving behind him. However, he was already almost out of the forest. An angry shout came from the front. 3 or 4 people jumped out at the same time and slashed with their sabers. They blocked Chu Yang's path. Chu Yang's eyes flashed. Then, he suddenly stomped his feet. His straightforward movement had strangely changed into a straight upward movement. He leaped 30 feet, and arrived above these people's heads. Then, his feet fiercely stomped on the trunk of a big tree behind him. The big tree shook as if it was spasming. Chu Yang and the big man flew out like a meteor. They left the forest and entered the wilderness. The people lying in ambush could no longer hold back. They revealed themselves and chased after them from all directions. Behind the black masks, everyone's eyes had already lost their calm and coldness. They were filled with anxiety. They had originally planned to wait for the 8 experts to rush out and hold back the majority of the enemy's forces. Then, they would rush out and kill Du Shiqing. Then, they would scatter. He did not expect a hothead to barge in and grab the commander's vital point. Now, their plan was completely ruined. Everyone was angry, but at the same time, they were also confused. How can the accuracy be so accurate when so many people are here? He grabbed the most important person in the first move. Could it be that he knows how to calculate? What the hell is going on? Chapter 52. The man in Chu Yang's hand was still unconscious and did not know what was happening. Chu Yang did not want to kill him. It was not that Chu Yang did not dare to kill. Killing people was a piece of cake for Chu Yang. His first priority was to solve the crisis in front of him. His second priority was to figure out where these people came from. These people were most likely from Iron Cloud. They were most likely the men of sacrifice who supported Tai Bu Tian. Only these people did not want Du Shiqing to come to Iron Cloud. If Du Shiqing's miraculous hands really helped Tai Shiqing recover, then Iron Cloud Nation would fall into an awkward situation of one country with 2 rulers. No matter how close the father and son worked together, their subordinates would not necessarily think so. Right now, Tai Bu Tian had become Iron Cloud's spiritual pillar and savior, their only hope. Tai Shiqing's recovery would greatly affect Tai Bu Tian's prestige and the morale of the entire army. This was because no army would be loyal to 2 leaders at the same time. If that was the case, then Iron Cloud Nation would have to face Diwu Qingru, this kind of matchless hero, without a doubt. If it was really these people, then Chu Yang could not kill them. Compared to Great Zhao, Iron Cloud's power was already at a disadvantage. No power should be given up. These men of sacrifice were the treasures of the army. If these people were killed, at least one thing was certain. At least one army would be in chaos. Whether or not it would affect the entire war situation, it would at least affect one part of the war. Therefore, since Chu Yang wanted to reverse fate and help Tai Bu Tian defeat Diwu Qingru, he could not bear to kill these people. Chu Yang's figure rushed out of the forest like a meteor. Behind him, a large group of men in black chased after him. Chu Yang did not care at all. His body rose and fell, and he was already in between the 2 sides. While he was still in midair, he shouted, "If you still want his life, then all of you stop." After he finished speaking, his body landed on the ground. He staggered and rolled on the ground with that person. He suddenly stood up and lost his balance again and fell to the ground. His face was red as he gasped for breath. Suddenly, he coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground in front of him. From the beginning to the end, he had been holding his breath and had not relaxed at all. The shock to his internal organs was really unimaginable. At this moment, he had just taken his first breath, but his entire body had gone limp, as if he had no strength left in his body. However, the first thing he did was to place the tip of his sword on the burly man's neck. Cold light flashed. He knelt on the ground just like that, holding the burly man's hand and holding his sword horizontally. He was gasping for breath and in an extremely sorry state, but his eyes were as calm and cold as ice. No one doubted that as long as they didn't do as he said, he would definitely chop off the head of this burly man. The situation was already very dangerous. Even though manager Gao was not at a disadvantage, it was impossible for him to save Du Shiqing. The other side knew that they were no match for the tall old man, so they fought without any regard for their own safety. He tried his best to stall him. Although all of them were injured, they refused to back down. The other 2 had already jumped onto the carriage. Out of the 8 guards who had accompanied him, 4 of them were already lying on the ground. In the next moment, they would be able to break into the carriage and grab Du Shiqing. However, At this moment, the situation suddenly reversed. It was as if someone had cast a spell on them. They all stared blankly at the young man who had suddenly rushed out. For a long time, they did not make a sound. This young man was in a very sorry state. His clothes were in tatters, and he looked like he was out of breath. The corner of his mouth was stained with blood, and he looked like he was on the verge of death. If it was just one person shouting, then the next moment, he would have been greeted with a sword. However, the person he was holding in his hand let everyone know that he was not joking. Even though he was gasping for breath, the sword in his hand did not move an inch. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Let him go. The leader of the masked men immediately recognized the person Chu Yang was holding. He could not help but angrily roar. At this moment, he even felt like he was dreaming. How could this be? Wasn't the general in a heavily guarded place? 100 blood-iron death soldiers, 8 martial masters, 20 martial warriors, and the rest were all martial disciples. Even the weakest one had a grade. Furthermore, there were siege crossbows and 50 divine archers. Such a powerful force could only be gathered by emptying an entire army. They had fully intended to crush the #1 divine doctor here like a mountain smashing a mosquito. How could the general fall into the hands of the enemy? In a dark night, in a dense forest, and the general was in the center of everyone's heart. He was protected in all directions. How could he appear here? Let him go. Chu Yang panted heavily and laughed. If it were you, would you let him go? You have only captured an insignificant person among us, and you want to threaten us? Ridiculous. Even though the leader of the masked men was anxious, his tone had already calmed down. Insignificant person? Chu Yang laughed and said, so he is just an insignificant person? Suddenly, his hand moved, and the tip of his sword made a cut on the man's shoulder. Immediately, blood spurted out. You. The masked men in black were shocked. One of them even took a step forward with concern. What are you doing? The leader of the masked men in black said angrily. Chu Yang held his sword and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. He said with annoyance, when you said he is an insignificant person, it made me very upset. I can't even hold my sword steadily. Besides, since he is just an insignificant person, you guys continue. Haha, let's divide the work clearly. You guys kill him, I will kill him. As he said, the long sword in his hand moved in a circle. The tip of the sword slowly but firmly pierced into the man's arm. Chu Yang's eyes were full of ridicule. He looked at the masked men in black with provocation. He let the blood flow along the tip of the sword and onto his body. Wait. The leader of the masked men in black finally couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward and asked, what do you want? Very simple. Retreat. Let us go. Chu Yang's panting finally calmed down. He slowly stood up and said shakily, as long as we are safe, I will let this insignificant person go. Haha. When he said the words insignificant person, he deliberately emphasized it and slowed down his tone. He was full of ridicule. You should first pull out your sword. The leader of the masked men in black angrily said, torturing people like this, what kind of hero are you? I have never been a hero, and I am definitely not a hero. Chu Yang slowly pulled out his sword and said coldly, right now, I only have one goal, to arrive at Ironcloud Citadel safely and quietly. I do not want to see anything else. I agree. The leader of the masked men in black said straightforwardly, but how do I know whether I should trust you or not? How can I trust you? Chu Yang said coldly, until now, I have not taken off his mask. Is this not enough? The masked men in black shook their bodies and said, yes, it is enough. Not taking off the mask meant that the other side did not want to make a big deal out of this and left a way out for both sides. Thus, there was room to turn the situation around. If the mask was taken off, with the general's identity, it would be difficult for the other side not to recognize him. At that time, the only option left was to kill him to silence him. He would also have to pay with the general's life. Most importantly, as long as Fire Saber Great Master Jiao Wei Cheng wanted to leave, they would not be able to stop him. Du Shiqing was invited by Grand Elder Bu Tian of Iron Cloud with Great Zhao's permission. As long as Gao Wei Cheng escaped and spread the news, it would be over. This could become a serious diplomatic incident between the two countries. Plus, they would become traitors of Iron Cloud. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.